Hello there, moin, as we say in Low Saxon. Thank you for joining my session and giving me the opportunity to tell you something about the language that I'm involved in preserving. And thank you, of course, Richard Simcott and everyone present at the Polyglot Conference for inviting me and making my language more widely known across the world, at least among the polyglot community. So, without further ado, let's get into my PowerPoint presentation, which I've prepared for you and I will share on the screen. So here we go, Low Saxon and Low German, the secret language of Northwestern German. Why would I call it Low Saxon or Low German? Because those are the two scholarly terms used to refer to this language. And the secret language of Northwestern Europe, you may have come across it in scholarly articles or when you're looking at etymology of English words. There's always a mention of Low Saxon or Low German there, but nobody really gives it much attention. And it's also a secret language because even most speakers don't know that they speak a separate language, because it's always lumped together either with Dutch or German. So it's been recognized, but we'll get to that. So here's some basic facts. How many people speak this language? Well, there's some 5 to 6 million active speakers who speak it on a daily basis, and there's about an estimate of 10 million passive speakers. One thing you'll have to keep in mind throughout this presentation is that there's no standard variety of Low Saxon. I'm going to stick to the word Low Saxon here. So there's no standard variety, but every town, every village has its own unique features. But that said, they can be grouped into roughly 4 dialect groups. So if we look at the map here, we can see that this part, that's roughly Northern Low Saxon. There's Mecklenburg-Pomeranian up here. There's Eastphalian somewhere down here. And there's Westphalian stretching all the way into the Netherlands as well. So here, the dialects in the Netherlands here are called Gronings and Noord-Drents, but some other parts of Drenthe and the province of Overijssel and a part of the province of Gelderland, they speak a Westphalian variety. But Low Saxon is under constant influence of either Standard Dutch in the Netherlands and High German in Germany. So sometimes the Dutch Low Saxon varieties are considered a separate group all on their own. Then, of course, there's the names. So why do we call it Low Saxon? Because it stems from Old Saxon, but we'll get to that. It's a scholarly term. Most speakers, as you can see in the list, usually refer to it by the names of local varieties. So I'm from the town of Riesen, so I could say I speak Riesens. But Riesen is in the region of Twente, so I could say I speak Riesens Twijns. Also, a widespread term is plat. That literally means flat, and you could interpret it as uneducated or shallow, but you can also see it as an abbreviation of Plattdeutsch, which is in English is Low German. So that refers to the fact that it's spoken in Germany on the lower lying plains of northern Germany, as opposed to High German from the higher Alpine regions. Then there's also people who call it simply dialect without specifying what dialect or a dialect of what. So there's that. There's hundreds of different names, which really doesn't help its image as a language on its own. I mentioned the speaker numbers, so how are these divided? There are 3.5 million speakers in Germany, 1.6 million in the Netherlands. There's about 15,000 in Denmark. I couldn't really find speaker numbers, but I could find people with German ancestry in Denmark living in this little area right here. And I know that they, migrated from this area somewhere the German state of Schleswig-Holstein, which is a northern Low Saxon area, so naturally the people living here will also speak Low German in North Low Saxon fashion. Interestingly, there's also about 300,000 speakers in Brazil, mostly of the Pomeranian variety, which is this area right here. Most people in the 1930s left the area for want of better opportunities, and they emigrated to Brazil and landed in the state of Espírito Santo. And, well, they naturally brought their language with them, so they spoke Pomeranian without any influence from High German or, whatever became fashionable in, the old country. So they retained the original Pomeranian dialect, while it gradually sort of died out in Mecklenburg-Vorpommern. So, and then there's, of course, loads of people who speak it across the world in the diaspora. This is a map of the diaspora, mainly caused by the Mennonite communities. They speak a variety of Low Saxon called Plautdeutsch. I call it the flat world. So flat obviously referring to the name Platt. As it says down at the bottom here, usually speakers in the books, these speakers, they're lumped together with speakers of High German dialects. So in Brazil, there's also a considerable group of Hunsrückisch High German, and they're lumped together with the Low Saxon, Low German speakers, but that's a different language altogether. Still, as they claim German ancestry, naturally it is assumed that they also speak German, which they don't. So, as precise numbers of the Saxon cannot be established, I take the liberty to simply call everyone Low Saxon, because that's what they've been doing to us as well. So there you go, a little activism there. Then the boring bit, the classification of the language. Well, it is a West Germanic language, and that means that it's closely related to and even resembles Dutch and German. Usually, when it's summarized, usually Low Saxon is called a mixture of Dutch and German. And this is a natural thing to think, because it's right in the middle between the centers of High German and Dutch. One thing that sets it apart is that it hasn't followed the High German consonant shift. And what is that? So let me give you an example. Dutch has ich eet een appel. German has ich esse einen Apfel. Low Saxon has ich ette nen appel. So it has the strong consonants of Dutch, but it kind of looks like German in the fact that it has certain grammatical features, which we'll get to. It has an SVO structure, a subject, verb, object. So in all main clauses, I, subject, eat, verb, object, an apple. So ich ette nen appel. And it follows the West Germanic branch in that it has SOV in subclauses. So subject, object, verb. I said that I, an apple, eat. Some light grammar to give you an idea of how we use our verbs. Ik hebbe, I hebt, he, ze en het hef, wie, I en ze hebt. As you can see, I've put the du hast between parentheses. That's because the Low Saxon varieties in the Netherlands no longer use the form of du, but they've replaced it with the formal form of second person plural. There you go. We also have 3 word genders. Some dialects have 2. My dialect happens to have 3. So masculine, feminine, and neuter. And that influences everything from adjectives to what have you and plurals. So we say one man is een man. So the suffix of big, which is groot, has to accord with that. So een grote man for feminine, we have ene grote vrouwe. And in neuter forms, één groot kind. There you go. Then some history. You've probably all heard of Old Saxon, which is their shared ancestor between English and Old Saxon, and it had a close resemblance to Old English and all the other old languages, what have you, because they all stemmed from West German or West Germanic. So they gradually grew apart over the centuries. Most of what we know about this language comes from the Old Saxon baptismal vow, forsakest tu diabole, so do you forsake the devil, and from the Heliand, which was a certain story about the classical story of Jesus, but it was adapted to, appeal to the Saxon people. And Old Saxon had 5 grammatical cases, 3 numbers, singular, dual, and plural. Many languages do. You're all polyglots, so you'll be familiar with the system. 3 word genders, so that's the only thing we've retained in Low Saxon, the three word genders. But without further ado, let's progress. We'll get to the Middle Saxon bit, and this is where it gets interesting, because this was a highly prestigious language. It had evolved from Old Saxon into Middle Saxon. Usually it's referred to as Middle Low German, but as it's from Saxon and it's still spoken by Saxon people, why not call it Middle Saxon? It was the trade lingua franca of the Hanseatic League, and the Hanseatic League was a sort of a networking group between cities across Germany and the Netherlands. So how big was this trading network? Well, I'll show you a map in the next slide. This picture is of the Kiek in de Kuk, which always makes the English speakers snicker, which is a big tower in Tallinn, which is the capital of Estonia. And even in Estonia and in Estonian, there's Middle Low Saxon words. So the Kiek in de Kuk means a peak in the kitchen. So here's the spread of the Hanseatic League. As you can see, it's quite a considerable area. As far as London and in England, and the Netherlands, as far south as Dinant in Belgium, and all across the Netherlands, all across Germany, across Poland, into Lithuania and the Baltic states, and as far in Novgorod in Russia, and the Scandinavian countries as well. So there's Bergen in Norway, there's Gotland in Sweden, and of course many cities in Denmark as well. So naturally that had a huge effect on the languages of northwestern Europe. About 40 to 60% of Scandinavian vocab today is Low Saxon, because, if you wanted to make money in those days, you had to speak Low Saxon. Sometimes it's referred to in terms of, what happened to English when the Norman French took over. It was a huge shift in the way the people spoke there. So, yeah, it was in all sorts of domains and all sorts of domains of daily life. We have rekening, which means the bill or the check or the account, and that these are words that people still use in the Scandinavian languages, and they all stem from Low Saxon rekening, which I've added in parentheses. All sorts of professions, like a skomaker, which is a shoemaker. Vi zijn nog altijd schoenmaker. In court and nobility, in the government, in military, in shipping and fishing, and loads of auxiliary verbs, adjectives, adverbs, prepositions. In all domains of these languages, you can find Low Saxon. If you want to know more about that, you can easily search for the influence of Middle Low German on the Scandinavian languages, written by Edward Sproston. But for the sake of time, I'll move on. So after the Hanseatic age it started to decline. The Dutch Golden Age started around 1650. Yeah, the Dutch and German nation states formed, and naturally, if you have a state, you have to have a state language. So the Dutch language was formed from Hollandic Western dialects and Zeelandic dialects. And in Germany, the German state formed and they decided on High German as the national language. Low Saxon lost prestige. They disintegrated into Low Saxon disintegrated into dialect islands, much like we see today. But it was still widely spoken. It just lost prestige and a central arrangement. In that era, education also became mandatory, and of course, the only mode of communication was the standard languages of Dutch and German. So Low Saxon was banned from schools. And then we get to the 1800s, where Low Saxon first went through a French era, because Napoleon gave us something to do. He gave us loads of French loans. My favorite one being Pull-up-a-Taten. I don't know if you can hear it, but we've Saxonified everything about the French loans we have. But some are more obvious than others, such as parapluie. But if I say Pull-up-a-Taten, you'll have a hard time figuring out what this is. So let me know if you know what the word is. Pull-up-a-Taten. Romanticism came up with the first poetic attempts, especially in the north of Germany. So we had Klaus Groth and Fritz Reuter. And they, idealized rural lifestyle. And Klaus Groth was actually the first one to treat this language as a full-on literary language. It had been in the Hanseatic times, but after it lost prestige, it hadn't been used in classrooms for, hundreds of years. So people generally didn't know much about it anymore. And then we get to the 20th century, which I've ominously dubbed all-time low Saxon. Why is that? Because we had two world wars. The Netherlands, they developed a negative attitude towards anything German. And in Germany, they were in tatters, really, and they were resettled. The Low Saxon areas were resettled by non-speakers, and they had loads of different, migration shifts. Also, with the dawn of television, both regional and national, Low Saxon was banned. Not a single word of Low Saxon was heard on any type of media whatsoever. And in the 1960s, my own parents also grew up in those days. Parents were actively discouraged from passing it on. And even to me, they said, well, you have to speak decently. You can't use this language, while they freely spoke it amongst themselves. But still, my siblings and me were told not to use this language. So there you go. In general, in the 20th century, Low Saxons suffered greatly from negative attitudes. There is a very limited general knowledge about Low Saxon. It was banned from schools. We were told, speak decently or else you were mocked in class for, being dumb. And if you couldn't speak Dutch or High German, you were dubbed as being dumb, being stupid. And there was strong stereotyping going on. Low Saxon is only for backward peasants, and we still hear these things said today. But then something happened in the 1970s. This is a picture of the rock group Normaal. This character right here with the red hat, fully in red, that's Benny Jolink. He's actually an artist. He's not a musician as such, but he's an artist who studied in Amsterdam, which is the west of the country, far removed from his homestead of, the Achterhoek, which is the Low Saxon speaking area. He got sick and tired of being told off for his accent and his, he was called a peasant, a farmer, while he wasn't a farmer at all, and he just wanted to be, judged by the things he did, not by his accent or where he was from. So he started a rock group, which it was unthinkable at the time that a rock group or any pop group or at all would sing or perform in Low Saxon because it was supposed to be in English or in Standard Dutch, but not in Low Saxon. But, he was unapologetically Low Saxon, and he, gained a huge following. And as you can see, most of his lyrics are about this. And, being a peasant and all these stereotypes, they took those and they enlarged them, they caricaturized them. And they made them so over the top that they made people realize that this actually isn't true. So it can't be true. It can't be this bad. So that's what they did. If you've ever been to one of his shows, you'll know there's lots of beer. There's lots of, stereotypical things going on. But yeah, they opened up a new way of looking at Low Saxon. So they've inspired many other bands. They've created a whole new cultural awareness. And, well, they're to be commended for that, aren't they? So here we go. In 1996, the Netherlands finally signed the European Charter for Regional and Minority Languages, which means that they have to, in some way, preserve or allow people to, speak or promote this language. But they've only, they've only recognized it at a level 2 at the time. I think in Germany it was 2 years later, 1998. Still, it was all down to the people themselves to speak this language, which it always is, but to have some sort of political backing always gives it a little more stature, right? So there you go. In the 21st century, we've had the internet revolution and a thing called the dialect renaissance, which means that people generally start to, in this globalized world, what are my roots? Where am I from? So there's a growing interest in the language, and but at the same time, after this, these disastrous years of the 1960s, there's a strong decline in actual speakers. That said, in my municipality of Riesenholten, above the the counters of the municipality hall, there's these signs that says Twents Sallands and Nederlands. So that's 2 dialects of Low Saxon and Dutch. So this was a huge thing because usually people were supposed to speak Dutch whenever they stepped up to a counter or got in touch with authorities. So we got internet. So in 2003, the Low German Wikipedia started, and in 2006, the Low Saxon Wikipedia started. This all comes down to how you write it, and that's a whole different discussion for which this talk is way too short. So let's just summarize in that the Germans usually use High German spelling conventions, and the Dutch use Dutch spelling conventions. They can't be united, they can't be brought together, because Germans don't speak Dutch, and the Dutch knowledge of High German is declining. While we do speak the same language, we write it differently. That said, in 2018, me and a few other German and Dutch speakers got together online to create the first all-encompassing spelling for Low Saxon. There you go. So, Low Saxon is now widely used in podcasts, which, some of those are mine. So the Wearldsproake podcast, you can find it on Spotify, but it's in Low Saxon on the topic of Low Saxon. Then there's Watata.nl, which means what's that then? It's also on Spotify, which is a load of banter. The Groninger podcast, which is specifically dedicated to the dialect of the province of Groningen. Praat Drents met mij, which is also dedicated to one specific dialect. There's Platcast and Platfunken Spraak, which are from the German area, but those are all in Low Saxon. So that has led me and a friend of mine to start a new podcast in English, which is called the Saxon series, in which we give these things we've just discussed a lot more attention. So there you go. Another thing I've been doing is experimenting. As I've been thinking about, how much Low Saxon has influenced the Scandinavian languages, I wanted to see whether we, after so many years of, being separated, we could still understand each other. So I found someone else, Erik Hansson from Sweden. I found him willing and able to, record a podcast session with me in which we try to understand each other while speaking both our own languages. So I spoke Twents, Low Saxon, and he spoke Skånsk, Swedish. And it turned out we did pretty well. But if you want to taste that, you can just type this in on YouTube and you'll find whatever you like. Other things that have been going on lately, which have, really upped the profile of Low Saxon, is in the Netherlands. The first fully Low Saxon film came out, which is called The Beentjes van Sint Hildegard, which in English is called The Marriage Escape. And the fun thing is, this title here says it was the best Dutch cinema film of 2020. People still don't see this as a separate language. So while they call it a Dutch film, it's actually fully in Low Saxon. And that's quite typical of how people view this language, but it was actually the best visited film in the Netherlands in 2022, which really gave a whole new, input for the appreciation for Low Saxon. So well done to them. Of course, it's also quite extensively used on social media. So on social media, as you can see, there's also all walks of life, people from all different backgrounds using Instagram and all to get together and speak Low Saxon to each other. This one's specifically dedicated to German speakers. They use it using the hashtag Platte Vrijdag, which is Plat Friday, so Flat Friday, and they get together and they go live together and, just have a good time together. Quite similar to what the Gaelic people have been doing, Bliain na Gaeilge, the year of Celtic, or Trustan na Donta, where they created an online community of speakers. Still, social media use of Low Saxon is not as widespread as I'd like it to be, because there are certain problems. Of course, there's always the spelling issue, because people have only been taught to write in Dutch or High German, so it's quite a huge step to start writing in Low Saxon. And of course, there's always the stereotypes and attitudes, because people usually still have these 1960s attitudes towards Low Saxon. So that stops people, hinders them from, giving it a go. And then there's an age problem. There's quite a few elderly speakers who really don't know or don't feel like using these new techniques. That said, if we look on TikTok, there's TikTok Tammo. He's also from the province of Groningen. He also calls himself the Grunfluencer, which is quite funny. But usually what happens on social media is that they tap into these stereotypes and they, maximize them. That's what he does. He has garnered quite a following, some 124,000 followers. So well done, TikTok Tammo. He just has a strong accent in his Dutch, because he actually speaks Dutch in the clips, and a tiny bit of Low Saxon. But there you go. This is my account on TikTok. As you see, I don't have as many followers, but I do have quite a nice reach, and I try to give all kinds of things on how this language works. So the syllabic consonant, which is quite a recognizable feature of Low Saxon, but is it? Because it's actually present in English and in all types of Germanic languages. I also have a clip on, weak forms or weak, strong and weak verbs. And of course, a little bit of banter to attract the masses. That's what people want to see. So let's give them what they want, right? But that may reach a new audience of young people. So that's all fun and games. But what happens in education? Is it taught in schools or what have you? Well, of course, there's always the problem of standardization and spelling problems. What type of Low Saxon are you gonna, use when you want to teach people in schools, and what kind of spelling will you use? Because there's hundreds of varieties. Which one are you going to pick? I'd have a very simple solution for that. I'd say use your own, the one you know, right? But who am I? But that's it. There are Low Saxon classes and exams being taken in Germany already, in some states of Germany. In the Netherlands, we're lagging a little behind, but there's now talk of a children's magazine, De Wisneuse, and I've been asked by the University of Twente to develop a course in and on the culture and language of Low Saxon for international students, and it's due 2022. So there you go. In a nutshell, this is what Low Saxon is and what the situation is today. I had to keep it short. If you want to follow me, these are my handles on several social media accounts. And of course, do send me a message, drop me a line, wherever you like, and I'll be happy to respond if you do have any questions. I thank you for your attention and hope to see you somewhere else or around the Polyglot Conference. Thank you.